I want to thank everyone who's had a hand in bringing us together this afternoon, particularly the indefatigable Maria Amelina. I am utterly delighted to be here. I actually came here 2 days ago after spending 3 days in Berlin, where I attended a conference. And it was a conference of museum directors from all over the world. And it was a gathering of individuals who were all specialists in this one thing that I've spent my life dedicated to, thinking about museums. And there was 2 days of deliberations on contemporary museums. And there was one single theme that was recurrent over that 2 days. And if you think, these are museum directors from all over the world. And that theme was Kenya. It was about Kenya being critically important to us thinking about the future of museums. And conversely, its specialists, Kenya's museum specialists, being critically important to the global museum sector. No other country, not even our host nation of Germany, was as discussed. The story that can be told through this country's geography, through its material culture, through its visual arts, is the story of humanity, and the most vivid account of creative endeavor that there ever has been. After China, the Smithsonian has more active programs in this country than in any other outside of the US. And yet, that unique, critical human story has no museological culminating chapter. The story of your utterly exceptional contemporary contribution to global culture is simply not being told in the way that it deserves. Also, the way in which the contribution of Kenyan artists can be seen within the context of this region, this phenomenal region of cultural production that is East Africa. Each year at the Smithsonian, my museum, the National Museum of African Art, we celebrate the work of an exceptional artist, someone who's changed the way that we see African art. And this year, we celebrated one of the truly unique talents of our sector, Wangechi Mutu, a magnificent artist and ambassador for this nation, whose work is a glorious celebration of both African pasts and Africa's possible futures. And that, I also think, by coincidence, that relationship between the past and the future is what is so magnificent about this project and about the way in which Maria Amelina has gone about seeking collaborators and seeking to drive this. She wants to give us a space to ruminate, to celebrate both African art history and African art futures, and to do it through the art of this region. And having witnessed Maria's energy at close hand, my advice is get on board. Maria is an unstoppable, irresistible force of nature, someone who has equal integrity and determination. And she has that critical quality of knowing how to deliver. This is an endeavor driven by hope, and driven by hope in a time when we truly need it. I could not commend it more. And we at the Smithsonian will do all in our power to help to support the realization of your aspirations. The artists of Kenya deserve it. The people of Kenya deserve it. And the world would be the grateful beneficiary. The genius of Wangechi Mutu is part of a long cultural tradition of great Kenyan art. And I would love to see a museum that could fittingly tell that story, that can link Adundo to Mutu. Museums are important. And if ever we needed museums, if ever we needed places where we might come together and be uplifted by the very best of humanity, it is now. Recent surveys have overwhelmingly demonstrated the high degree to which people, wherever they live, support and believe in their museums, regardless of political affiliation, geographic location, or whether they visit museums or not. In Europe, 97% of people believe that museums provide a valuable educational resource. In the US, 89% of the population recognize the important economic contribution of jobs to jobs that museums offer. Across the world, 96% of people recently surveyed approved of their elected officials who act to support museums. Museums are important to us. But these are reasons which are often proffered. You'll see these in so many surveys. But I think that there's another set of reasons that museums are increasingly important. Survey after survey, newspaper report after newspaper report has recounted to us how nations are more divided today than at any time in recent memory. Across culture, across age, across geography, across educational lines, fractures have torn traditional sociologies apart. In the West, there's a particular chasm between people living in affluent multicultural cities and those from struggling post-industrial towns that could potentially imperil nations. Across much of the global South, there are similar tensions between the rural and the metropolitan communities. People are justifiably concerned, yet simultaneously, strangely, empathy is on the wane. In a recent survey, only 12% of people said that they noticed an increase in people to put others before themselves. The vast majority of us believe that empathy is slowly disappearing. These are the results of worldwide surveys, that something is amiss for us. In the US, where I live, a nation founded by waves of immigration, over centuries, and it's traditionally been considered to be a melting pot, and has celebrated that very idea. Its values were founded upon accommodating and occasionally celebrating the particularistic identities of varied constituent cultures. Yet today, we find ourselves in a very difficult situation in which we feel a sense of skepticism for the first time in a generation about immigration and demographic pockets that immigrants form around them. And there's a similar kind of feeling that seems to be threatening the stability of the European Union, of areas of Africa, Central America, Australia, and other regions of the world. The international press write of societies being broken, about cultures being dysfunctional, of communities needing to heal. The young, the educated, the globally minded, the well-off, they want to celebrate the possibilities of demographic change. But there are many others who feel that their communities and ways of life face existential threat. People want change. We're angry. We need to find safe spaces where we might come together, where we might craft new inclusive narratives and simultaneously find those things that uplift us. I think museums have a role. Though we might be divided, museums are part of a tiny handful of institutions that we globally feel positive about. I think that we intuit that the presentation of cultural heritage is critical to our understanding of who we are. It's the mirror that we hold up to ourselves, the portrait of ourselves that we want to show to others. And there are times when delivering the right cultural stories can offer profound catharsis, can give mental space for reflection, can be the perfect tool for brokering resolution or closure on difficult passages of history. Our shared cultural heritage might make for lovely intellectual comfort eating when things are going well. But when we pass through periods that leave us shaken, then these national totems cease to be luxuries. They become essential. Art is a critical anchor in understanding who we are, reminding us of our values and suggesting possible paths through present challenges. Heritage and culture are not luxuries. They are essential to understanding who we are, and equally important, to understanding each other. And the best museums celebrate that. They are places of reflection and refuge. As I'm sure you know, the word museum comes from the Greek. It's derived from the word muse. It's a word that comes from a period in which groups of inspirational women would weave stories around incredible objects, and society valued that form of interpretation. These women were known as muses. The home of these inspirational goddesses of literature, of the arts, of sciences, was incredibly important in ancient Greek. Diodorus, the ancient Greek historian, he reveled in the idea of this, and he traveled widely looking for these muses. He traveled to India, to Iraq, to North Africa, and he speculated on where the muses may have originally come from. And he came to a conclusion that the muses were probably African. And I've always felt that he would have seen that place that we hold for African women within our cultures. He would have seen that within antiquity. He would have seen them as a kind of custodian of a critical communal narrative that would have come alive through objects. And that's what the muses did, that they told stories that brought education alive, that brought communities together. He would have recognized the value of that amazing tradition of Africans animating objects through narrative. For many peoples of African descent, these are things that we recognize almost innately. I know these muses, and I know the traditions from which they're drawn. My earliest memories are of my Ghanaian aunts visiting our South London home, and they'd arrive with caseloads of wonderful things. A length of cloth that they would unravel over our living room floor. 100-year-old piece of silk, and they'd tell its life story, ream after ream of cloth that would be unraveled, each with its own biography. And then each length of material will be carefully packed away, leaving the house smelling of that wonderful, wonderful aroma of paraffin and palm oil and petroleum jelly. That is the power of objects to ground us, to draw us together, to make sense of the world. That is one of my first memories of objects, one of the things that made me want to be a curator. But it's also the power of the communal muse, the curator, the museum, that inspirational custodian of objects and their ability to bring material culture to life. And that, in my mind, is what we now all require. Beguiling narrative to bind us, to give us emotional fortitude and make sense of our past and to make sense of our futures. Museums could almost uniquely help us to forge through materials potent links to our shared past. The underpinning driver, in my mind, for more healthy societies. So let's join this particular region. Let's join other regions of Africa in crafting a new generation of world-class, truly sustainable museums that speak to local audiences, that resonate with the global cultural sector, that demonstrate great governance, that boast the highest museological standards, that host world-class curation and collections, and that have the power, most importantly, that have the power to draw us together, to truly inspire, to touch hearts and minds, to change the world in ways that we all want to see. Thank you so much.